Hello, I'm Sue Searing. I'm a storyteller in Minneapolis. I live near Powderhorn Park. And this year, for Halloween 2021, I've decided to record some ghost stories and make them available to my friends and neighbors. Until we can get together again after this pandemic is over and gather and listen in person. So sit back and prepare to have your spine tingled. This is the story of a little girl who wasn't afraid of anything. There was once a little girl who wasn't afraid of anything. When the other children said, "Ooh, a spider!" she said, "I'm not afraid of spiders." Or they said, "Oh, I can't climb that tree. I'm afraid of heights." The little girl who wasn't afraid of anything said, "I'm not scared of heights," and she climbed right up and played in the branches all day. Now, sometimes her friends got a little irritated by her courage and her constant bravery, and they would say things like, "Well, if you're so brave, why don't you just go run and jump off that cliff?" And she'd say, "I'm brave. I'm not stupid." Well, one day at school at lunch, she was sitting around with her friends and they were talking about the haunted house on the other side of town. That big old house that no one had lived in for years and years, right next to the graveyard. "Oh," said one of the children, "if you try to spend the night there, you'll die. Everyone who's tried to spend the night there has been found in the morning, dead on the floor." "Really?" said the little girl who wasn't afraid of anything. "Really," said another child. "Or if they're not dead. If they're not dead, they're insane because the ghost scared them crazy." "Really?" said the little girl who wasn't afraid of anything. "I'm not afraid of haunted houses." "Oh, yeah?" said the other kids. "Well, then you spend the night there." Now, this might have been a good time for her to say, "I'm brave, but I'm not stupid." But the truth was she wasn't afraid of haunted houses, so she said, "Okay, I will. I'll sleep there tonight." And so that very night, when her parents were sound asleep, the little girl sneaked out of the house and crossed town and went to the haunted house. Now she took with her a sleeping bag and a pillow, a bag of snacks, and a flashlight. When she got there, she looked at that house. It looked just like a haunted house. It was big and old and really run down. Half the shingles had fallen off, all the shutters were hanging at crazy angles, and half the windows or more were broken. She thought she saw a bat fly into one of them. But she wasn't afraid. She made her way across the front yard, which was all overgrown with tangles of weeds, up onto the porch and to the front door. She tried the doorknob. It wasn't locked. So she pulled it open, and she went in. Click, she turned on her flashlight and she shone it around. Oh, no one had been in this house for a very long time. There was dust and cobwebs everywhere. Not much furniture, though. She made her way through what must have been the living room, into what must have been the dining room, a big table and chairs just covered with inches of dust. Even the dishes that sat out there were still covered with dust and dead flies. And then on into the kitchen at the back of the house. Now, this house was so old that it didn't have a stove. It was from so far long ago that they used to cook in the fireplace. Over an open fire, and so She decided that's where she would sleep. There was no fire, of course, but it just seemed cozier there. She found a broom in the corner and she swept away the dead leaves and the mouse droppings and the dirt on the floor till she cleared a space for her sleeping bag, and then she rolled it out, put her pillow down, sat down, ate a candy bar, and decided, well, she hadn't seen any ghost yet. She listened. She heard a little rustling up on the floor above. "I'm sure it's just mice," she said. "I'm not afraid of mice." She turned off her flashlight and lay down on her sleeping bag to sleep. Oh, she was tired. And then suddenly she was startled awake because she heard a sound. Thunkety, 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 down the chimney. Something landed in the fireplace. She flipped on her flashlight and looked. It was a hand, a severed human hand. Well, she thought. She looked closer. It was a hand, all right, but it was just laying there. It wasn't doing anything. It wasn't moving. Didn't seem to be alive. Well, I'm not afraid of a dead hand, she thought. She turned off the flashlight and lay back down again. Thunkety, thunkety, thunkety! Another hand came down the chimney because she turned on her flashlight and saw it. Oh, well, she said, two hands. Of course, there's two hands. She didn't turn her flashlight off this time, though. In just a second, thunkety, thunkety, thunkety! Down the chimney came an arm. Well, said the little girl, who wasn't afraid of anything, if there's hands, there must be arms. Thunkety, thunkety, thunkety! Another arm came down the chimney. Two hands, two arms, she said. It's not terribly frightening. But she waited. Thunkety, 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 thunkety! A foot landed in the fireplace. Thunkety, thunkety, thunkety! Another foot landed in the fireplace. Well, said the little girl, I suppose there'll be legs next. Thunkety, 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 thunk! A leg fell into the fireplace. Thunkety, thunkety, thunkety! Another leg came after it. Two legs, two arms, 2 feet, 2 hands, said the little girl. I wonder what's next. Thunkety, thunkety, thunkety! A torso fell down the chimney and landed in the fireplace. The girl held her breath, and sure enough, after a long, long minute, thunkety, 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 a head dropped out of the chimney, and then it began to roll across the floor, past her, and into a dark corner of the room. She followed it with her eyes. But it stayed there, stayed back in the corner. The other parts were in the fireplace. The head was back in the corner. Nothing was moving. Well, it's odd, she thought, but it's not that scary. I think I'll just sit here till morning. And as she sat there, suddenly the feet began to move. Step, 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 step. They walked over right next to the legs and click, click, attached themselves to the ankles. Then the hands began to creep, creepity, 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 right over to the arms and click, click, attach themselves to the wrists. Then the legs inched over and click, click, attached to the hips. And the arms slid across the floor and click, click, attached to the shoulders. The girl who wasn't afraid of anything, took a deep breath and turned to look at the head in the corner. And the head began to move, and it began to roll toward her, rolling across the floor, back toward the rest of the body. And as it went past her, the eyelids fluttered. And it rolled on, and then click, it attached to the neck. And as she watched, the body stood up, and it began to move. A jerky, awkward sort of movement. And then it stood up, and it began to walk toward her. And that's when she screamed! She screamed, and she turned, and she ran out of the kitchen, and she heard the body behind her, chasing her, chasing her, chasing her. She ran through the dining room. It was chasing her, chasing her, chasing her. She ran to the living room. She could hear it closer behind her, coming faster, faster behind her. She ran to the door. She grabbed the doorknob, and the door was locked. How did the door get locked? She had not locked it. And then she felt its hands on her shoulders, and it whipped her around, and it looked at her, and it leaned in, and it breathed its hot, stinky breath in her face. And the body said, "Little girl, what's the matter? Don't you like me?" She didn't know what to say. Mr. Zombie, I don't know. I just met you. Are you afraid of me? Well, she knew how to answer that. Of course not. I'm not afraid of anything. Really? Really? Because everybody who comes here leaves or dies because they're afraid of me. Will you stay? Will you be my friend? Of course I will, said the little girl. Well, I can only stay till morning, though. And then she took the zombie's hand. Would you like a snack? She said. I would love a snack. And so hand in hand they walked back to the kitchen, where she had left her backpack with her treats. And they sat down, and they ate chips and candy and apples, and told stories to each other until the sun came up.